Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hi, and welcome to News from the Torah. I'm Leah Aharoni. Today is July 11th, the second day of the month of Av. Yes, we're in a new Jewish month, the month of Av. And this week, we're starting a new book of the Torah, the book of Dvarim, Deuteronomy, one long monologue of Moshe before he's about to pass away, his final will and testament to the Jewish people before they go into the land of Israel. But this week is special in a different way. This week is part of what we call the 9 days. The 9 days from the first day of the month of Av, Rosh Chodesh, that was yesterday on Shabbat, until Tisha B'Av, the day of the destruction of the two temples, and hopefully the building of the third. It is a period of mourning, an unusual time for the Jewish people because being happy, being joyous, and serving God with happiness and joy is a cornerstone of Jewish religion. But there's one time during the Jewish year when we leave the joy, set it aside, and we concentrate on mourning. It's a mourning period of 3 weeks, and after 2 weeks of medium grade mourning, we're going into the heavy duty mourning this week. Now, Tisha B'Av is supposed to be on this coming Shabbat, but we don't mourn on Shabbat. All laws of mourning are suspended on Shabbat, and this Shabbat will be just a regular Shabbat, and the day of mourning will be pushed off to Sunday. There are a few laws that are observed during this week. For example, people don't eat meat except for Shabbat and don't drink wine. There is a custom of not wearing freshly laundered clothes or not ironing clothes. There's also a custom of not buying new things. And in general, staying low, not investing too much time in business, not trading too much. If you have a court case or a surgery or starting a new procedure or a new business venture, this is not a good time to start it. Push it off for a week. And this coming Shabbat has a very special name. It's called Shabbat Chazon. It's a time when we get a vision of the third Beit HaMikdash, of the third temple. And I'm going to talk to you more about that right after the break. So stay tuned.
The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago and is coming true today. Shalom. Join me, Josh Wander, on Israel Unplugged. Listen in as we delve into the spiritual and physical aspects of the Jewish return to Zion. We'll discuss the biblically mandated, historic, and of course practical understandings of this incredible transition from exile to redemption. That's Israel Unplugged, every Monday on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Welcome back. So as we said, this Shabbat is called Shabbat Chazon, the Shabbat of Vision. Where did it get this name? On this Shabbat, we read a special Haftarah, a prophecy of Yeshayahu, Isaiah, that talks about the vision of the destruction that he has. And therefore, this Shabbat is called after the first word of this Haftarah, Chazon, vision. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev says on that on this Shabbat, every single Jew is shown the vision of the third temple. Some of us feel it, some of us don't, but every one of us sees it in one way or the other. And he shares a parable. Once there was a father, and he sewed his son a beautiful garment, and he gave it to the boy. So the little boy put on the beautiful garment, went out to play, and sure enough, as little kids do, he tore it apart. He came back, and the father was upset. He took the garment and put it away. So he went ahead and suit for his son, once again, another beautiful outfit. And once again, the kid put the outfit on and went out, played, and ripped the garment. He came back home, took off the garment, and the father, as you can understand, went ahead and sewed for his son a third beautiful outfit. But this time he didn't give it to the son. He said, "Sweetheart, you need to grow up. You need to grow up and to learn how to behave so that you can wear this outfit without ripping it. I'm going to put it in the closet, and from time to time I will show it to you. And when you're grown up and mature enough to wear it without spoiling it, I will give it to you." And so the father made this beautiful outfit, and from time to time he would take it out at specific times, show it to his son as a reminder for the son to grow up and mature, and one day have the beautiful outfit to wear on a special occasion. And Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev says, the Jewish people are just like that boy. We had the first temple, but we didn't behave nicely, quote unquote, and we ruined it. And then God gave us the second temple, and we tried as much as we could and as hard as we could, but we messed it up and we lost it. So now God has built for us the third Beit HaMikdash, the third temple. It is standing ready to come down from heaven as soon as we are ready, as soon as we as a nation have matured and learn how to behave ourselves, which means learn how to behave ourselves nicely, first and foremost, to each other. And every year on this Shabbat, the Shabbat of Chazon, the one that we will celebrate this week, God shows each one of us our personal vision of the Beit HaMikdash. And I want to ask you, what does your personal vision of Beit HaMikdash look like? What does it look like to you? Have you ever thought about it? Have you ever sat down and thought, what would redemption look like? It is said that when a person passes away and he reaches the heavenly court, he or she is asked a series of questions. One of the questions that the person is asked upon passing away is, did you yearn for Mashiach to come? Did you yearn for redemption? And obviously the answer that a person is supposed to give is yes. But let me ask you this. What exactly are you yearning for? What is your vision of redemption? Have you ever actually sat down, closed your eyes, and tried to imagine what it would look like if Mashiach was to come tomorrow? What would your life look like? You know, there's a famous Jewish joke that once a person went to the synagogue and the rabbi said that Mashiach is supposed to come any day, any moment. And the man came back home to his wife and said, I was in the synagogue and the rabbi said that Mashiach can come any day, any moment. And the wife said, well, Moshe, what does that mean? What will we need to do? He says, what do you mean? Well, we'll have to pack everything up and move to Israel. And the wife said, what? Pack everything up? Move to Israel? What are we going to do with our cow? What are we going to do with our house? And, I made time with my neighbor to go to the town next week to run some errands. What are we going to do with this Mashiach business and moving to Israel? This doesn't work for me. And the husband says, Malka, don't worry. God has saved us many times. God will save us from Mashiach too. It's funny, but it's not. We talk a lot about redemption. We talk a lot about Mashiach. But what does it actually mean? Have we ever asked ourselves, what will the world look like when Mashiach comes? What will the world look like in redemption? It will be qualitatively different from the world that we'll live in. It won't be just quantitatively different. It won't be just peaceful and quiet and everybody will have enough to eat. It will be somehow qualitatively different from what we know. And I think we can't really imagine it, but we need to. I think we need to give ourselves the time, especially this week, to sit down, close our eyes, turn on our imagination, and try to see what it would look like. The Lubavitcher Rebbe shared that he had visions of what Mashiach and redemption would look like since before he was 3 years old. Before he was 3 years old, before he started his Jewish schooling, he started having visions of what Mashiach and redemption would look like. And this is why the Rebbe was so singularly focused on bringing Mashiach. And he spoke about Mashiach for the next 90 years until he passed away. And I think that one reason that Mashiach is not coming is because we're really not that singularly focused. And we're not focused because we don't know what to be focused on. We haven't sat down and had the vision. And maybe our vision will be far off. But having a vision gives us something to yearn for, gives us something to aspire to. What is the most perfect world you can imagine? What is the perfection, the utopia, that everything is exactly as it needs to be? Sit down for a few minutes after the show and try to envision a perfect world where every single thing is exactly as it's supposed to be, and where God is present and clear to every single one of us, where God is not hidden, where you can see Him. And that vision will bring all of us one step closer to Mashiach. Now in Shabbat, God shows every single one of us a vision of Mashiach and Beit HaMikdash that we need. And the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe says, what's the purpose of showing it to us? We don't see it. Most of us don't see it. He says, yeah, you don't see it. Maybe you don't see it on a conscious level, but your soul sees it. And once again, he brings a beautiful, beautiful parable to show what it looks like. He says, when you have a few people riding in a carriage drawn by horses from one place to the other, and the carriage driver hits the horses to go faster, right? We don't like any animal cruelty, but this is what was done in the previous generations. So the horses, they have no clue what's the point of going faster. They like it just the way it is. There's no point in rushing, but they get hit on the back, and obviously that makes them rush. Finally, after running for miles and miles and miles, they arrive at their final destination, and they're given oats to eat. And now in their horse understanding, they say, that's why we needed to rush. That was the point of the trip. We were rushing, we were making this trip to get to the oats. And the carriage driver, he also has some kind of understanding of the purpose of this trip. His purpose is to make some money. But in that carriage are sitting the geniuses, the rabbis of the generation, and they're talking words of Torah. And for them, the purpose of this trip is to come to a different place where they can learn more Torah or teach more Torah, to have new understandings. And they have a completely different vision and purpose for this trip. So maybe we are like horses, says the Rebbe. We don't see anything more than the oats. But just because we are at a horse level, we only see the oats, doesn't mean that there's actually no vision. And the higher levels of our soul, they do see the vision. And somehow, a little bit, that vision trickles down to us. So yes, the horses will be horses, but the geniuses will be geniuses. And the understandings that the geniuses have will trickle down to the horses too. Now the horses is obviously an allusion to our animal soul. We have inside of us a soul that is driven by the animal, the instinct, the nature. It's the soul that seeks pleasures and food and drink and short-term instant gratification. It's just like an animal, but on it rides our godly soul, our spiritual side, the one that understands that there's great true purpose to the world, the great true purpose to reveal godliness in everything, to see godliness in everything, to be in a constant state of reception of God's light. And that great spirit, that divine soul, understands the point of the trip, understands the point of the exercise. And that soul, that part of us that we might not be conscious of, it for sure sees a grand, beautiful vision of the Beit HaMikdash. So let's make it real. Let's bring it down. This week, let's sit down and have our vision of the redemption of the Beit HaMikdash. And this way, hopefully, we will also narrate it. Stay put. We will be right back.
Hi everyone, this is Andrea Simento from Jerusalem, inviting you to drop everything and join me on my show, Pull Up a Chair. We'll visit this week's quirky stories, meet fabulous guests, and discover my Israel. Together we'll laugh, shout, and explain the topics that make us say, hey, we've got to talk about that. So get comfortable and pull up a chair with me, Andrea Simento, every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back. So, if this week we're talking about visions, I would like to share a memory I had a very clear vision of this week. I completely forgot about it, but last week I had a meeting, and in this meeting somebody reminisced about an Israeli-Russian soccer game from the 1960s that riveted Israel. That mention brought up a flood of memories from when I was about 11 or 12 years old. And for the first time in decades, an Israeli basketball team, if I'm not mistaken, it was Maccabi Tel Aviv, was allowed to come to Russia and play against the Russians. I think this was about 1987 or 1988, and after 3 decades of no diplomatic relations between Russia and Israel, as glasnost and perestroika was starting to take their hold in Russia, Russians thought their relationship with Israel, and for the first time they allowed an Israeli sports team to come to play in Russia. My parents got tickets to the game, and we went as a family. It was quite a sight. The entire basketball court was packed with thousands of Russian Jews, and the atmosphere was absolutely electric. We all cheered for the Israelis. Every time Israelis scored, everyone got up with frenzied screaming of, "Hey, hey, Israel," at the top of their lungs. The Israelis were surprised to come to such a warm welcome. Now, the place crawled with KGB, and Zionism was still forbidden, but nobody cared. People threw caution to the wind. Russian officials, police, and basketball players were absolutely shocked. They didn't know what hit them. They looked helpless and out of place. Just watching these people, the ones that always had the grip of fear on us, the Russian officials and the police, that we never knew what would come from them, they looked so helpless, so lost. It was probably the sweetest revenge we could feel. I can't remember another time being with so many people, so emotionally connected to the Jewishness. Having never been to Israel, knowing almost nothing about it, and despite being brought up under communist anti-Israel propaganda, we all knew in our bones that we're one people and that Israel is our homeland. This basketball match was the only way to connect back then. It was the only way for 10,000 Jews to connect to Israel, and so they did. It was a clear victory to Judaism, which the Soviets could not uproot, even after 70 years of prosecution and brainwashing. And if you still need to ask, yes, Israelis won. We won, and we were so happy. I completely forgot about this event, and today this memory floated. I'm tearing up just talking about it. The Tanya, the Hasidic work we have mentioned here quite a few times, writes, that one's connection to Judaism, to one's Jewish soul, is in the DNA. It is not something you can easily sever. No matter how hard one tries, no matter how far a Jew is removed from Torah and mitzvot, no matter where you bring them up, when push comes to shove, that connection to Judishness and to God will surface in the strongest of ways. Over the duration of history, many Jews were put to a test, whether to denounce their Judaism or save their life. And over again, even Jews who were very far removed from Torah knowledge or Torah observance chose to give up their life only to stay connected to Judaism. The Tanya says that this is the ultimate act of revelation of the Jewish soul. And this phenomenon of Jews giving up their life for Torah and for God, even if they didn't live by it, was proof that Jewishness is in the DNA. You can't get rid of it. That basketball court was a show of misrut nefesh, of being willing to endanger yourself for the purpose of your Jewishness. Thousands of Jews affirmed their connection. Jews who didn't know anything about godliness, Jews who didn't know anything about Torah, Jews who didn't know anything about mitzvot, Jews who for 3 generations were denied the ability to learn about their Jewish roots, Jews who were brainwashed that religion is opium for the masses, that Zionism is the ultimate evil. No matter what the Russians did, they could not cut these Jews off from their roots, and that basketball game was just proof of that. And I feel so privileged to have been there. It's a memory that I treasure and that I shared with my children around the Shabbat table. And they were as excited as I was. And I'm thinking of maybe taking them to a Maccabi Tel Aviv game this summer to relive the experience. It is so interesting how something like sports can connect us to our roots. My friend has 2 sons and they play on the Israeli baseball team. Yes, there is such a thing. The Israeli Olympic baseball team. Most of the players are not Israelis, but some are. And I know 2 boys from the same family who are playing on that game. Now, the Israeli baseball team is making rounds of the United States, and they were playing 9 exhibition games this year all around the United States before they head off to Japan for the Olympics. And I'm sure that in those baseball games will be sitting little kids from different towns in the United States, little kids who may know or may not know a lot about their Jewishness. But seeing the Israeli players on that baseball court is going to be all that connection. Maybe some of those kids will experience what I did on that basketball court in Russia 30 years ago. The American kids know they are not deprived of Jewishness. They're not deprived of Jewish education. They do not grow up in a communist regime that routinely puts down their Jewishness. But they do grow up in an environment where Zionism is being put down, and increasingly they're growing up in an atmosphere of anti-Semitism. So I hope for these kids that seeing Israeli baseball players play against their home team will be a moment of national pride, of Jewish pride, a moment they will treasure for years to come. And do you want to know where the Israeli baseball team is playing in this coming week so you can take your kids and help them experience a moment of Israeli pride and Jewish pride? Well, here you go. Today, Sunday, the Israeli baseball team is playing New York Bravest at the Maimonides Park in Brooklyn. Then Monday, the 12th, they're playing New York Boulders at Palisades Credit Union Park in Pomona, New York. On the 14th, Bristol Blues, Dunkin' Donuts Park, Hartford, Connecticut. The 15th, Ocean State Waves in Dunkin' Donuts Park, Hartford, Connecticut. On the 16th, Ripken League All-Stars, F&B Field, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. On the 17th, Squatchahana Valley Stars in Clipper Magazine Stadium in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. On the 18th, Bethesda Big Train in Shirley Povitz Field in Bethesda, Maryland. On the 19th, Ripken League All-Star in Leaders Field, Ripken Stadium, Aberdeen, Maryland. And on the 20th, they play in the New York Finest in Fairfield Properties Ballpark in Central Islip, New York. So here's a chance for you to take your kids to see an Israeli baseball team. For Israelis, this sounds so funny because Israelis literally don't know what baseball is. But because there is an Israeli baseball team with some Israelis on it, it is just possible that they will win a medal when they go to Japan for the Olympics. However, they are playing in the United States in the Northeast. So once again, if you want to take your kid for a moment of Jewish pride to an Israeli baseball team showing, please do that. And maybe 30 years from now, the kid will be, oh, Mom, I so remember seeing Israelis play baseball, and it was such a special thing for me. You never know what experience is going to do it for your kids. You never know what experience that you're giving your kids as a child, an experience of Jewish connection, will stay for them for years to come. I don't think my parents thought that they would be instilling Jewishness, a connection to Israel, when they took me to that game. Or actually, maybe they did. Whatever Jewish experiences you can give your kids, whatever Jewish experiences you can have together, will stick with them forever. I remember in 12th grade having a high school teacher, Rabbi Naftali Harkstark, and he used to say, guys, gals, you have to make sure to have lots of positive Jewish experiences. They will stay with you forever. And you parents out there, what are the positive Jewish experiences you're giving your kids? They can be in anything. They can be in basketball or in baseball. They could be in the arts. They can be in cooking and literature. Give your kids those amazing, beautiful Jewish experiences. Things when they will look back at and have a vision of their Jewish pride, a vision of their Jewish connection, a vision that nobody can ever take away from them. As we talk about the vision of the third temple this week, for each one of us, that Jewish connection looks different. It connects to our soul in a way that is special for us. And no, I'm not a big basketball fan, and I'm not a big baseball fan, but that vision of that game, somewhere in the late 1980s, is part of my vision for the third Beit HaMikdash. More about that after the break.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
And me, William Hall,
on the Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Hello, I am Walter Bingham. If you want to hear the news behind the news and the true perspective on world affairs, then the Walter Bingham File is the program for you. We bring you interviews with the movers and shakers, political commentaries, and on-the-spot reports of events as they happen. All here every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Israel time, 9 a.m. Eastern time. And it's all archived on our website. Make it a date.
Welcome back for the third and final segment of the show that is really all about the vision of redemption. I want to ask you a question. I want you to think of a person who you love, a person who is close to you, a spouse, a sibling, a child, a coworker, a parent. Think of the hardest, most difficult, most painful interaction you have had with that person. And going back to that interaction, how did you feel? At the height of that painful interaction, in the depth of the despair, did you feel love for that person? Or maybe something different? This week marks the biggest break, the biggest crisis in the relationship between the Jewish people and God. And yet, Isaiah, in this week's Haftarah, the one called Chazon, the one that is the vision, says the Jewish people are still the children of God. And he returns and returns and returns and reuses and reuses and reuses this language of children time and time again, stressing the point that even in this crisis, even in the depth of despair, even in the destruction and the loss of the temple, the Jewish people stay the children of God. The Pesetsner Rebbe, the Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto, asks, why is this Torah portion, why is this week that always falls out before Tisha B'Av called Chazon? And he said this during the Holocaust, in a speech he gave inside the ghetto during the Holocaust, that before the war, we would sit down on the ground at Tisha B'Av and cry over descriptions of destructions, over the description of the crisis of Tisha B'Av, of the loss of the two temples. But he says knowing that something is destroyed, knowing about suffering, is not the same as seeing it, and is certainly not the same as feeling it. He says now that we're in the war, now that we're in the ghetto, now that many of us have experienced the pain of the destruction, we have a completely different understanding of it than we had before the war. And he gives a beautiful parable. He says that when a father has to take a child for surgery, so the father understands that the surgery is for the child's own good. And the father obviously gives the child over to the surgeons to be operated on. And while the father might be sitting in the waiting room and understanding intellectually that the child is going through an operation, most parents would not want to be in the operating room. Most parents would not want to see the child being operated on. But this is not how God is. God doesn't only understand intellectually that we're suffering. God is with us in the suffering. And in the previous segments, when we talked about the vision, we talked about our vision for the temple. But the Pesetsner Rebbe explains that it is not only our vision, it's God's vision. Yes, God understands that destroying the two temples and sending us into exile was for our own good. Otherwise, we would have lost our connection. We weren't living up to our potential. And to learn to live up to our potential as the Jewish people, we need this tough love. We need this discipline of exile. It's a lesson. And it's a painful lesson. It has been an extremely painful lesson for 2,000 years. But unlike a human father, God doesn't just leave us to take this lesson. He comes with us to experience the lesson, and He watches us in our suffering. He's with us every step of the way. And we learn the same in the exile in Egypt, and it is this way in this exile, in this painful exile. God is with us every step of the way. And unlike us, if you remember, I started this segment asking you about a difficult time that you had with a dear person. At that time, you might not have felt love, but God tells us that even in the darkest moments, the times of greatest despair, He still feels that we're His children, and He still has love for us, even as He disciplines us, even as He sends us out of our land. He still has love for us, and we are His children. And in this, says the Slonimer Rebbe, this week of Parshat Chazon is the best, most beautiful, most inspiring, biggest Shabbat of the entire year. Why? Because it is easy to experience love when you're close. It is easy to experience love when everything is going well. It is easy to use terms of endearment where and when the dear ones are dear to you and you love them. It is so much harder to use those terms of endearment to stand by your love when things are not going well. And this is what God tells us on this Shabbat. It doesn't matter what happens between us. It doesn't matter what happens to you. It doesn't matter what pain you're going through. I will still be your God, and you will be my people. You will be my children, always. And ironically, out of the biggest darkness, you can appreciate the light. And out of the biggest despair, you can appreciate the love. The fact that we will always stay God's children, no matter what, that God will never replace the Jewish people as his people. And any other religion and any other people can try to use their replacement theories and say that they're the new Israel, or that God has forsaken Israel because of their behavior and chosen this nation or that nation, this religion or that religion. None of that is true. Isaiah told us 3 years ago, yes, you've misbehaved. Yes, you've been rebellious. Yes, you've been ungrateful. Yes, I'm kicking you out. And you are my kids. You're not going anywhere. I'll love you and I'm going with you into the exile, into the darkness. We will always stay together and I will bring you back. I will see you through this. So no replacement theory, people. You are not going to replace the Jewish people. Never, ever, ever. It is simply not happening. And I know there are many people out there listening to this show. And I know that maybe some of you feel lonely. Some of you may feel despair. Some of you may feel like life is not going your way. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe spent quite some time in a Russian prison where he was tortured and when his life was in danger. And when he came out, he said that he learned one thing, that a Jew is never alone. No matter what is happening in your life, no matter how bad things go, no matter how alone you feel, you are never alone. God is always by your side because you are his child and he loves you dearly. He adores you. And it doesn't matter what you've done, and it doesn't matter how you have behaved. It doesn't matter. You cannot sever this relationship. You cannot cut yourself off. You can always come back. And he's standing by your side, watching you through it, and just waiting for you to come back, waiting for you to know that he's there. All you need to do is just look up and say, God, where are you? I miss you. I want to see you. I'm alone. I'm not noticing you. Things are going so hard. And this, says the Slonim Rebbe, this is the truest sense of worshiping God. This is the biggest way, the most beautiful, the most pristine way you can worship God. Understanding that he is with you in the dark moments. And ironically, it is Shabbat that enables us to do it. On Shabbat, all of our work is done. And all that we do on Shabbat is spend time together. It is our weekly quality time with God. And when we have this Shabbat Chazon, when we have this Shabbat, which is supposed to be Tisha B'Av, it's a day that we're supposed to fast, we're supposed to not eat, not drink, just sit and mourn. And for quite a few times in the past few years, Tisha B'Av fell on Shabbat and was pushed off. God is telling us, we'll get to that fasting thing. But really what I want us to be close. I want us to be together. So let's rectify all of those problems. Let's spend Tisha B'Av as a Shabbat, as a time together when we are together in love, in a relationship, when all the work is done and the only thing we need to do is sit side by side, God and his people, and be together in celebration. And this is what we will do. This Tisha B'Av. We will eat meat, drink wine, have fun, and celebrate, because the Shabbat of is not only the day on which the two temples were destroyed. The Talmud says that the Shabbat of is also the day on which Mashiach was born and will be born every single year. And I hope that this year in Tisha B'Av we will not be fasting. Well, we will not be fasting, it will be a Shabbat. But I hope that this year there is no Tisha B'Av, that by the time that Sunday of next week rolls around, we'll be living in an experience of revelation, that we will see this Shabbat. I hope that this Shabbat, this vision of revelation, will stop being a vision and become a reality. And I bless all of us that we will merit to live in that reality. Sending you hugs and love, and remember, God is always with you. God always loves you. He's always watching over you. Until next week, this is Leah Roney with the news from the Torah. Bye-bye now.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
If you're hearing this message, everyone else can too. Advertise with Israel News Talk Radio and get your message out to people. We'll build a personalized package for you. Contact advertising at israelnewstalkradio.com.
Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey, this is Jake in Anchorage, Alaska, and I love listening to all the super interesting interviews and up-to-date information on what's happening in Israel.
Hello, this is Anna King, originally from London, now living in Israel. And what can I say? Israel News Talk Radio is my cup of tea.
My name is Bhaskar. I'm from India, and I love listening because you get to know the truth and wonderful voices from this lovely country.
Mom! Okay, wait a minute. Hi, this is Chava Dax, and I'm calling from the rolling hills of Ma'ale Adumim, just north of Jerusalem. I always listen to Israel News Talk Radio to get all the latest news and commentary and to keep me up to date every day.
This is Sarah Dax from Ma'ale Adumim, and I'm 12. I wish Israel News Talk Radio was boring so my mom wouldn't listen to it all the time. Mom!
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.